Have you been long ready?
Yes, we have.
But nobody told me.
I've been asking them to
Even
send.
last time I warned you
Yes.
that in my family when I start talking
Yes,
on the
yes.
table, I tend to forget these things.
Yes.
But normally,
Yes.
but this
Yes,
is for
yes.
the new time.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Still, I have not yet fully registered it. So I'm glad that the press secretary
Yes.
telephoned me, and then I immediately came. I could have been here dot on time.
Yes. Well, I will keep him. Yes.
So these young girls seem to be
Yes.
some
Yes.
college or students or something.
They are all 4 students from Tiffin Girls Grammar School in Kingston.
Grammar schools.
Yes. They are specially studying religious studies and making deep studies about
so
Islam
happy
and Christianity.
Them to who invited them?
Rajab Ali Sahib, he was one-time teacher there.
I was
Acha.
there for 6 years. I was the head of social sciences at the school.
So they belong to the same school?
Same school.
Right. So thank you for organizing this meeting. Sorry to have kept you waiting, but I've told you why.
Yeah.
It's just clean. I forgot it
Yeah.
clean completely because previously we used to hold such meetings in the morning at 11 something. So I'm used to that time. So for the last 2 meetings this time have been changed. So again, my apologies, and please, shall we start?
Yes, please.
Okay.
First question.
My name's Elizabeth, and
Elizabeth, right,
studying religious studies at Tiffin.
right.
I was interested in what you thought about the death penalty, whether it can ever be justified, and if so, when.
On this issue, I have spoken many a time before,
Yeah.
but for each session, of course, I have to repeat the same answers, though not exactly the same. The principle of death penalty is accepted by all religions alike. As far as the religions go, tooth for tooth and eye for eye and life for life is the established principle in all religions. In Islam, there is one little difference, which is a sort of relaxation. And in Islam, the right to forgive belongs to those who suffer, not to the state. So if it abhors people to see people hanged for murder, then according to Islam, the state is an impersonal instrument. It has no right to forgive for a crime, forgive a crime which is committed against somebody else. So permission, of course, there is, not only of forgiveness but complete forgiveness. But those who belong to who hold the authority in the family, that is, those who are left behind, the head of that family, he has the right, or the family as such have the right to forgive. Now this principle is far more sensible, because sometimes the injury done to the psychological injury, done to the family is so deep and so unforgettable that in the name of mercy, to show mercy to a criminal and not to show mercy to them, this is not fair. This is against the principle of justice. And again, there are other factors which have to be brought into the focus of attention before legislation is done. The point is, if you abolish capital punishment, what would be the reaction in the society? How the criminals would take it? Will they consider it as a license to kill? Or will they feel that the society has done that good thing, to a good act, so we should also respond in the same coin? This would never happen, the second option I mean. The criminals are encouraged, with the result that if you compare the incidents of murder before such legislations and after, the difference will be marked. And I have read the data, I have read the figures, and I am speaking from that incidents of murder in England rose sharply after this measure of abolishing capital punishment. it's not just this, there are other problems as well. When you do not have capital punishment and also you believe that children, the people who are not of age, they can murder and they can go scot-free, what would it do to the society? The British people they are mature people, they are world's greatest politicians in the whole, in the world, when I say, I mean the whole world, because the long background of colonization and colonial imperialism, which the British can boast of, none else can in the whole world. The German imperialism was finished 70 or more years before. But your imperialism continued into this century, into these decades, and would go perhaps beyond for a while. So you have famous diplomats, famous politicians and this and that. Better wisdom is expected of you. You should have realized that if people who are not mature according to your laws, if they are just 6 months below the final mark, and they murder and they can run away with it, do you know what you are doing? It's not just showing mercy to a criminal or encouraging him. It's preparing the next generation of criminals. Because criminals are not made after they reach adulthood. Criminals are made during the childhood period. And this period is highly critical, which we were talking about, from 11 to 17, 16, whatever period they fix. This is the most critical period of responsibility. And once these children are encouraged to be hardened, then nothing can cure them afterwards. It's all gone forever. So it's a much wider issue than just to show mercy on somebody. Then mercy at what cost? At the cost of innocent people? Mercy to the criminal at the cost of innocent people. That's not a fair dealing, is it? Please.
I was wondering what the Muslim opinion was on genetic engineering.
Yes.
In relation to it being used to help eradicate genetic diseases such as Down syndrome, diseases like that.
On genetic engineering, again, this is a common topical issue of the world today. I have spoken many times from different angles. The Holy Quran is very clear on that. It's amazing that a book which was revealed more than 1400 years ago spoke clearly of genetic engineering and with a note of very severe warning. The Holy Quran is full of scientific the prophecies which deal with scientific advancement of mankind. Prophecies which got fulfilled only in our age, and there's so many of them that it's impossible for one to consider it to have happened accidentally or by chance. But I don't want to go into that detail. One thing which I want to impress upon your mind is that none of these prophecies are mentioned with a warning, except this. When the Holy Quran speaks of genetic engineering, it speaks of the genetic engineering in terms which are so easily understandable today. They may not be understandable then, but people must have thought something would happen of this nature. The Holy Quran says that it will be Satan who would induce humans, to interfere in the creation of God and change it. How on earth could a man visualize the capability of humans to change the creation of God? Absolutely unthinkable. But then the Holy Quran says, because it will be Satan's doing, such people who will do it, they may suffer severe chastisement out of this, and they may be punished for this. Now, when I read this verse, it's long before this cloning, etc., they came to be known. And I have been talking about this, all my recorded cassettes, videos are witness that I have been speaking of these things purely with reference to the Quran. The Quran says this should happen, is going to happen. Now the important thing about this is that you may not be able to control whatever you produce genetically. So what is forbidden is changing the nature of God's creation. What is not forbidden is to help the God's creation to retain itself, to preserve itself. So your question perhaps belongs to this second part. If genetic engineering is employed to cure diseases, particularly congenital diseases, then this is not against the teaching of the Quran. Nowhere is it forbidden. To aid God's creation is a good thing, but to change it is a completely different issue. So when in America some experiments were carried out on certain insects which were harmful to the crops in general, they created some bacteria which could kill those insects which were harmful and could promote such as were beneficial for the crops, and they experimented to a degree successfully, but to their utter surprise and fear. What according to genetic science should have been produced was not produced exactly as they had conjectured or expected. And they were amazed to see that the same gene transferred from one chromosome to another insect's chromosome in the right order did not produce exactly the same results as it had produced in the original. Something new came into being. Now these are the dangers to which the Quran refers, that man may be punished by his own creation, because he is not all wise. The creator is all wise. He knows the balances. He has created the ecosystem so perfectly. So if you interfere and poke your noses in things which do not belong to you, what you do is you just claim to be the creator, while you are not. Ordinary people who have no idea of these things, they really think that the scientists have created humans and this and that. They have done nothing of the sort. What they have done is, what God has created, they have picked up a part of that and shifted it to some place else, while the entire complex structure of protein, which results into reproduction of these things, is made by God, not by them. So they alter the creation very small, in a small measure, but they cannot create themselves. It is wrong to believe that they can create. But even if they could create, they are bound to land into ultimate difficulty, or even they may meet disaster. Because when I realized, really, I shuddered to think of the time when genetic slaves of humans capture the role of their masters. This is a real possibility, a real danger. Right? Please.
Concerning arranged marriages, when parents look for a partner for their child, do they take into account their own preferences and or their child's preferences?
It's a question which should be answered differently in application to different parents. So it's a question which cannot be answered in generalities. I can only answer such a question if you inquire from me the principle of arranged marriages and how far they can be beneficial and what is the philosophy behind that. Then of course, if somebody follows that and does not act accordingly, it's his fault or her fault, but the teaching would be above censure. Now the concept of arranged marriage is that the girls particularly are vulnerable to cheat boys and men. They attract, the God has made them so attractive that anybody who begins to woo and praise them and say, oh, I love you so much, you're so beautiful, never seen the like of you, once they believe, the women are far more loyal than men to their sentimental attachments, and they take them really very seriously. So sometimes a cheat wants to enjoy them temporarily, and they become his forever, and they suffer a lot because of that. And many a time they tell them about their background something which is absolutely false. There is nothing of the sort at all. Like I have seen people coming from Pakistan and India who tell the British girls here, once they somehow entice them, that they have they were Nawabs or Rajas of that place and that place. And what they were just pawnbrokers or small things. Not small things in other sense, but as compared to what they claim, they are just nothing. And the girls say, poor girls, they are impressed. Only when they return, they go with them to their country, then they realize what happened. I know of one such girl who was so impressed by the stories of her husband. Before he became her husband, she told us these stories. That at last she insisted, I must go and see your industry and things. He had told him that they have a large sweet industry, and their sweet is famous all over. Now what his father did was, he had a small, we call khokha, or a corner shop, small in size like this, and he sat there alone and used to make his own sweetmeat. And what he took every care not to be completely false. So he gave it a different twist. He said, we have a sweetmeat factory. And when she saw it, she was flabbergasted. What do you mean? Is it a factory? He said, yes, this is a question of English. We call this as factory. Your factories are big, our factories are small. But that girl left him after that. It was impossible for her to live with such a liar. But these things happen every day here. People show off and speak highly of their family background, their this and their that. And when the girl ultimately is fallen into the trap, then it's too late. Then the suffering begins. Unfortunately, these days of showing off don't last long. Within a few days they are over. Then the true colors are begun to be shown. That courtesy, that kindness, that patience, which the men show during the wooing period, all dissipates into thin air within a matter of a few months or even less than that. It is said that somebody asked a man about his experience of marriage and how did he find it before and after and this and that. He said, yes, I can tell you very easy, no problem. He said, before I married my wife, I used to talk and talk and talk, and she was so patient a listener. She would listen, amazed and transfixed, looking up at me in wonder as if she was in a dream. When I married, then we swapped the, this, what you call it, role. And she began to talk and talk and talk, and I was a patient sufferer continuously for a month or so. He said, then what happened? He said, then a stage reached that we both talked continuously, and the neighbors around used to listen to what we were saying. That is, we shouted at each other, and all the respect was gone, and no more patient listening by one or the other. Now, these are normal things to happen. The early period of so-called wooing and love-making and dating is all marred by acting and showing things which do not exist or cannot exist for long. They are temporary things. Parents cannot be deceived. If that girl brings such a person to the house of the parents, they would inquire from him, ask questions, and because they are not in love with him, they would judge him critically. The result is that their decision is, according to my experience in our Jamaat, our Ahmadiyya community, most often their judgment is right. They tell the girl, you don't do this, you will be destroyed. And most often the girls in Ahmadiyya community listen to the advice of their parents. Those who don't, they suffer. And they write to me letters of deep sorrow and repentance and this and that we have destroyed our lives, and unfortunately our parents were right and we were wrong. So what Islam does, now here comes the teaching of Islam. Islam permits a girl not to accept the choice of her parents. If she says no, hers will be the last no. But she cannot impose her choice on the parents either. If the parents say no, so she can't do anything. So they are locked in a situation where mutual consent has to be sought and reached. And when this happens, mostly the arranged marriages are far better than unarranged marriages. There is very small incidence of divorce in the marriages which are arranged, like I have just told you. But unfortunately, among the Muslims, marriages are not arranged like this. That is what has created a very false impression of arranged marriages in the world outside Islam. The Muslims are divided into two extremes today. I am not talking about Ahmadiyya community. We are a very well organized community, and we adhere strictly to these principles. But in general, the Muslims are divided into two sort of categories. One, who are extremely backwards, uneducated or partially educated, and they are the people who are rigid in these things. So they do not even ask their daughters. They think it's an insult to them, and they think they hold the authority over the daughter. Wherever they send that daughter, she must go. And such families, even when they come to England, they treat their daughters exactly like this. Sometimes you might have read such cases, very ugly cases of coercion by the parents, and which sometimes result even in murders, because they think these are our rights, they belong to us. But Islam does not provide them this authority over their own children. Nowhere. No parents can impose their will on their daughters. So either they do this, or their daughters are so completely free that they make their choices in the streets, in the clubs, and the parents have no authority, no control. And both these marriages are ruined, in fact. If not all, in a large number of cases, they are ruined marriages. So I believe in the wisdom of Islamic teaching, where this balance is kept, and it needs to be kept. Otherwise, if you study the facts, many single parent women are left to dangle high and dry without any support, without any father to take care of the children, and because somebody comes and enjoys himself and leaves the burden of a child, transfers the burden to the wife and the girl and disappears. What is the answer? There is no legal marriage to compel such a person. So nowadays they are contemplating such laws as would compel somebody, if it is proved that it is his child, to take the burden and responsibility of the upbringing of that child. Even if such a legislation is passed, it is not enough, it is not sufficient. There is far more to it. The presence of a male member in the family, to whom ultimately the authority of this day-to-day decision making belongs, is highly important psychologically for a child to develop with discipline. When there is only mother, she can either be over much loving or posed to be over much stern, and still the child would not gain a normal balanced personality. Now this is the finding of those psychologists who have studied this question of single parenthood and their effects. The same is true of a single male taking care of the children. His problems are perhaps even more complicated, because he has to leave them either to the care of a babysitter or sometimes just by themselves, and so many problems created by divorce, which is or divorce or without bearing children without marriage. And this is a natural result of the system of girls moving around freely with whomsoever they like, and the boys picking whatever girls they like, and enjoying a life in the name of just studying each other and saying whether we fit or not, we are fit to marry each other or not. Far more often, the case is that it is not a real, genuine investigation. It's a case of cheap enjoyment without responsibility. Right? In my family, I have married the last daughter only a few days ago, and all the 4 daughters are, with the grace of Allah, very happy, very contented. And in such cases as these, if you do care for the principles involved in this, the marriages are not only successful otherwise, but the loyalty between the wife and the husband is unique. There is full trust, no question of any doubts at all at any stage, because the girl has not seen a man privately anywhere before, and the boy has not run away with any woman, has not spent any period of his life with irresponsible living. So what people think they miss is their gain. To gain loyalty and to have full trust in the partner as to the pleasure of living together, to a degree where those who do not experience this cannot imagine what it is. This mutual trust gives their player a permanence. The lack of this will take away that permanency about the player. It's like just a passing taste of something, and it gets over, and the same thing becomes boring, no longer interesting. There is no kick left in that. But loyalty, which grows naturally from within, is a guarantee for safeguarding the player to become permanent and remain permanent. Even the nearness of the two people who are loyal to each other, who belong to each other and we are loyal, that creates and generates a sort of deep sense of pleasure and satisfaction, which just the kick of temporary enjoyments cannot be compared with. It's impossible. They're two different things altogether. So if you go deeper into this issue, I'm sure you'll realize that this is a better society and more safeguards are provided to ladies than in other societies.
I was wondering what the Islamic view of homosexuality is, and especially in light of the scientific research that has recently suggested that it could be due to chemicals in the brain.
You see, all this is mere hocus pocus. I can prove it. I have been a student of science. I have read genetics. I know all these things. But you have only heard this much, and you have not heard that a person is genetically inclined to steal, to rob, to kill, to do whatever he likes. If genetical impulse is accepted as a genuine excuse for crime, then there will be no order left in the whole of the society. Chaos will be the name of the society. Again, it's against scientific facts of evolution. I am amazed at the simplicity of people who accept this jargon. The fact is that the pleasure, what we know, of taste, of hearing, of seeing, of whatever you call it, is a result of certain measures taken by nature to safeguard the safety of the species. The pleasure of sex was not born as such. It was a long experience of, say, millions upon millions of years of two forms of life coming together and reproducing. That sense that we are safeguarding our own existence and we are prolonging it, that sense was pleasurable without any buds having been formed as yet. But over a very long period, those pleasures were turned into buds. The same was true of eating. The amoebas eat, but they have no buds to enjoy the sense of eating, the pleasure of eating. The animals began to eat just for the sheer necessity of survival, without pleasure. But then that created those sensory organs with the passage of time, which recorded the realization that yes, we are doing something good for us. So the pleasure of sex was created by God through this plan. Otherwise, it was quite possible that though animals would continue to do it through instinct, when man is given an option, he would cease to care to reproduce, unless there was some pleasure attached to it which he could not be able to ignore. The gravitational pull of sex according to Freud, is the greatest. I don't agree with him, but I know that after the sense of personal survival, this is the most powerful motive force. So it is created with a purpose to achieve a purpose. It is not accidental. And the purpose is preservation of species. And that purpose cannot be served through homosexuality. So you go off the mark. It's against the grain of nature that you're working. So to call it a natural urge because of genetic twist and this and that is all false. Why were the two townships of the time of Lot, were obliterated from the face of earth by God? Why? There were other crimes. The society was full of crimes, but they were not completely destroyed and annihilated. But these people were. The message was that the organs of sex were not created for the purpose of delivering pleasure. Pleasure was derived to remind you of your responsibility and prepare you for undertaking that responsibility. So when you are completely ignoring the very purpose of creation, then you must suffer the natural consequences. You reject the reproductive part of it. So be ready to die and finish. If this is the society, then no humans can be born in the second generation at all. So this was the message delivered by God to all the mankind who could think and see. But those who refuse to think and see, what of them? So there are oddities here and there are freaks of nature, I agree, which are created due to the accidents of nature. But you do not permit them a free hand to exercise those compulsions or impulses. If somebody is born with a twisted chromosome and he has a tendency to murder, all madmen do. Not all, but many madmen do. Would you permit them to do it? Go ahead, yes. You must serve your natural instinct. No fault of yours. Go on and enjoy yourself. Most certainly not. And then a continuous habit of something creates distorted tastes and creates new impulses. So in a society which is permissive of homosexuality, with the passage of time, more homosexuals are bound to be born. So are the genes changing every day? It's not that. It is because it's a common experience. You permit the drug addiction and so many people will get drug addict that they may make the majority of the society. But that would not give them a license, because if we have this urge, what can we do about it? Urge is something else, and right and wrong are quite a different thing, are something else. So Islam roundly condemns any employment of human organs which work against the design of God. Right? Thank you.
I was interested in what you thought about adoption, because I've read that Islamic law says that you can't adopt a child and treat it as your own equally to your other children. And I thought that was what...
This is not that.
This is what I don't know, that's what I was asking, because I thought it sounded odd. And was that not what Muhammad did with Zayd?
No, this is not it.
Oh.
What Islam says is, again, this is a question of God being the creator.
Yeah.
What the Quran says is that if you call somebody your sister, she cannot be your sister. You may treat her as your sister if you please, but she cannot be your sister in the eyes of law. Similarly, if you call somebody your son, he will not be a legal son of yours, because a legal son would require your blood, your genes, your character and everything. So why distort nature by giving things different names? So Islam does not prohibit adoption of children at all. In our family, I know there are some adoptions, but with adoption also the love is created like very close to the genuine love between mother and child and father and child and so on. But the laws cannot change. That child would still be marriageable with all the relatives, which if he was a real son, he could not even dream of marrying. So Allah permits you to adopt sisters, brothers, whatever you like, but you cannot defy the law of God. That is a completely different story, right?
I was wondering in Islam whether it is encouraged for Muslims to actively go out and try and convert members of other faiths and non-believers.
What?
Convert to the Islam.
Convert to other faiths?
Whether
Or convert others to your faith?
Yeah.
Which one are you interested in?
Converting others to the Islamic faith.
Islam promotes it.
Okay.
Very strongly, in fact, because Islam is the one religion which claims to be universal. And how could it become a universal religion if it would not promote preaching to others, making every possible effort to convert others to the faith of Islam? Perhaps you might have heard something else which may have originated this question.
Well, I was just
That is, if please, if you can make yourself clearer, I would answer you after hearing you.
I was wondering where in Western countries such as this, how it must be very difficult for Muslims to convert others in light of
In Western countries,
in the light of the teachings on shirk and the women's prayers.
That's a different problem. But in reality, it is far easier to convert somebody to Islam in a Muslim country, in a Christian country, than to convert a Muslim to Christianity in Muslim countries. Particularly in Afghanistan, in Saudi Arabia and other such countries which are notorious for their extremism. There they believe that Islam only offers a one-way traffic. You can enter but can never get out. And if you try to, we have a right to kill you. Now this extremism is the outcome of the fanatics of the medieval era in Islam. It never happened at the time of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. According to the Quran, people came to Islam in the morning and walked out of it in the evening. Both passages were open. At one time, somebody from some other place, I don't remember which country, but he didn't belong to Mecca or the surrounding areas. He visited Medina and requested the Holy Prophet to convert him to Islam. He said, yes, do this, read La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, there is no God but one, and Muhammad is his servant and prophet, and you become a Muslim. Then after a while, he was well fed and well taken care of, and perhaps that was the only purpose for which he had become Muslim. So while leaving, he requested Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to return to him his old faith and take Islam back. Now that was a simple way, simple mind of that person, which imagined that Islam was some commodity which could be exchanged, by taking and returning and so on. So Rasulullah said, no problem. If you don't want to remain a Muslim, you are not a Muslim. And he left it that. He didn't draw his sword and strike at him and behead him because he had renegaded. So there is no punishment in Islam for renouncing Islam. It is only the medieval clergy of Islam which has unfortunately done this wrong to Islam, because they have demolished the image of Islam. They have blemished Islam with something which Islam never earned, never deserved to be treated like this. So if that is what you have in mind, this is my answer. Islam opens both doors. You can walk in and walk out. It is for God to punish. And if it had not happened, such a religion as the medievalists today believe could not become a universal religion. It's impossible. For a religion to walk into other countries and say, you are welcome to come to us, but we warn you, you can never get out. People say, all right, keep your cage to yourself, we don't want to enter this cage. Right?
As a Muslim living in the modern world today, do you find that yourself or other Muslims are influenced by Western society and tempted to neglect their duties at all?
I couldn't hear the last little bit. The previous one I understood.
Do you find that Muslims are tempted to neglect their duties?
It depends on which Muslims you have in mind. If Islam is a universal religion, this is a big if, then it is impossible for Islam not to be able to be practiced easily anywhere in the world, or the claim is false. But if the Muslims are shy of their Islam, they don't believe in it fully, or they don't understand it, if they do not really believe in God and the Prophet and the teaching to have originated from the source of ultimate wisdom, then they would be shy and embarrassed at practicing Islam here and there, and they would rather not than appear to others as a man of the bygone days, or a person belonging to many centuries ago. So those people who feel embarrassed are such people as these. I remember during my travels, in fact I shouldn't say travels, but once when I visited United States of America along with my two elder daughters and my wife, we used to say prayer in public wherever the time came, and we used to do it as we call by Jamaat, in congregation, as you saw us performing the prayer in the mosque this evening. And they stood behind me, three ladies, my wife and two daughters, and we said prayer in congregation, and we were not in the least ruffled with the thought of what people would think of us. And what people thought of us was something which those who didn't do it, if they knew, they would start doing it. Actually, you are respected for your principles and your honor, not for imitating others. I saw people surrounding us with downcast eyes, with respect, and after I had finished the prayer, they would walk up to me and hold my hand with love and say, it was so wonderful to see some people right in the middle of America praying God like you did. And it was always so impressive. But this was not the purpose. We were ready for all embarrassments, yet that's why we did. But this is not what it resulted in. So principles should never be a source of embarrassment to the person who holds them. If you do it with full confidence and sense of responsibility, then they never actually become a source of embarrassment because people respect principles. So I don't think there should be any difficulty at all in practicing Islam here in this country. When I was a student here, I used to request my teachers to permit me sometimes to say my prayer in their room, which sometimes was empty, vacated. And without fail, they cooperated with me in every respect. And sometimes they stood guard in the front of the room that somebody should walk in and disturb me. So, true Islam, and for that matter every true religion, if practiced according to the initial teachings, is not difficult to practice anywhere in the world. Right? Sorry, please.
Islam teaches not to idolize a normal human being, so what does it think of pop stars and such people that teenagers follow and idolize?
I couldn't get the question, please, clearly.
Muslims, talking about Muslim children. Muslim children. They're idolizing, making them ideals. This pop stars and others.
Idolizing is a different thing, and making ideals is a different thing. Strictly speaking, idolizing means to raise somebody's status to the status of God, a deity whom you worship. And idealizing means that you believe in imaginary principles as realities, but they do not exist in real life. So, some people live an ideal life or attempt to live an ideal life or want to have an ideal husband. This means a husband which can only be found in ideas but not in real life. But to make idol of somebody is a different thing altogether. To follow somebody in such total submission that nothing of your own will is left, and you are sort of, enslaved by and captured by somebody else. This is idolizing, as I understand. I may be wrong. So what is your question in view of this difference which I have explained?
Well, some people still do go to the ends of actually idolizing, completely following a pop star or whatever.
Of course, I agree with them.
But idealizing,
Yes.
what's the view of
That's
the
a
children
different story.
idealizing a pop star or
Without
somebody like that?
idealizing, you cannot do justice to yourself, because everybody's concept of perfection is different from the other, and you may have a completely different ideal from mine. So you must realize what your ideal is, and you must remain in search of that ideal. If you get your ideal, and it so happens that you are also an ideal to that person, in that case the life can be a heaven on earth, a paradise, real paradise. But most often it does not happen. Most happen you think somebody is your ideal, but because of acting, because of deceit, because of the human propensity to, not human propensity but distorted human attitude is that they are prone to cheat others in relation to their own inner self. So what they pose to be is most often not true. You present a personality which is your own ideal, and if somebody else is looking for such an ideal as that person would be deceived, he would fall into trap of this acting. So idealizing is a must, but with this precaution, that when you search for your ideal, you should realize that people sometimes try to cheat others, and they are not that which they show themselves to be. The test for that is not to live privately for a long time with such people. The test is very simple. In ordinary daily practice of life, if they easily tell lies to please you, never trust them. Because if a person is true, he does not at any stage, even in the extreme compulsion, tell lies to save himself or gain some advantage from others. Such a person is the only person who is trustworthy. If he happens to be your ideal, then you are the luckiest person on earth. But without truth, nobody must ever be trusted. And it's not difficult to judge at all, because people say, look here, we belong to each other. No, we are cheating others. We are telling this falsehood to others for each other's sake. The moment they do it, they are caught. Their whole case is destroyed. And it's impossible for a false man to pose to be true in every situation. It's impossible. He may be false in front, but from behind he would be true. So his inner self will reflect from this corner or from that corner. So an untrue man will be caught and shall be caught. So with this principle to help you guard your interests, I hope inshallah you will, God willing, you will get your ideal. So I hope and pray.
As a Muslim, what does going to Mecca on Hajj mean to you?
Pilgrimage is common to all religions.
Yeah.
So whatever it means to others, the same, not exactly, but to some extent it means to us to go to pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is a religious obligation on every Muslim for once a life, if he can afford, if the passage is safe and he can afford to do it. And there what you do is you concentrate all the forms of worship which you have been performing throughout your life in a matter of a few days. Everything is represented there. And you are understood to be born anew. So it's a very moving experience and spiritual experience if you do it with sincerity and by understanding the philosophy of pilgrimage. If you just do it to perform your duty and share the load of responsibility by doing it once and walking out free, it doesn't serve any purpose. People go to Hajj spending all their lives in criminal activities and return to those criminal activities the moment they return home. So that is not the purpose of pilgrimage. Pilgrimage is like a bath, a total bath, which washes you of all your sins and blemishes, and it's not easy. It's extremely difficult. So if you understand the philosophy, then you go well prepared to sacrifice all these old habits and destroy them and walk out anew from the pilgrimage. So I hope this was the philosophy everywhere, but people unfortunately forgot it. Right?
Yeah.
And before we leave, and he's showing me the sign that the time is over, I must pay you a compliment that you, all of you, speak excellent English. I mean, your accent, your pronunciation is perfect Southern English. While most of the girls who come from schools, it's very difficult for me to understand them. You know, Put hand on my, yes, what did you say? They let me say, they over accentuate certain syllables. And I'm not used to understanding that sort of exaggerated pronunciation. But you all spoke perfect English. Is it because it's your background or something? Or you belong to Surrey or Kent?
Sorry.
Surrey?
Yeah.
The Surrey people.
Yeah. Talk well.
They belong to a county where English is born and where it is nurtured, and they are rightly proud of being the best English speaking people.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.